So today we're going to be taking a look at a scenario where the Abbasid Caliphate comes back. Now I will say that this word, Abbasid, has very many pronunciations. It's a translated word, so obviously English pronunciations aren't going to be perfect. So I do want to say before we start that I apologize for any incorrect pronunciations. But this thing is coming back. This is probably one of the greater empires of history, and this is it at its peak in 850-ish. Now there are some debates about when it actually did reach its peak. This is just off of a map that I found online. So like with the pronunciation thing, I could be incorrect here, so I also apologize for that. But if you guys do enjoy today's video, make sure to leave a like on it and subscribe to the channel if you're new. All the support is greatly appreciated as we're trying to get to 200,000 subscribers. And let's go ahead and jump straight into this video. So the Abbasid Caliphate has come back out of nowhere. Basically, this unites a good portion of the Islamic world. You do leave out a little bit of Turkey, and then you leave out a lot of North Africa, but you do get the core area in the Arabic and Mesopotamian regions, and you also get a good chunk of Persia and its surrounding areas. This thing would be pretty strong if it came back. Now, I do know that it would probably not be too stable, but this is a fictional scenario in the first place, so we're not going to be worrying about things like that. Stability, we don't need it. And this video is in particular going to be looking at war scenarios. Now I know that most of you guys know this, most of my subscribers know this, but for anyone new, I do war scenarios on this channel. So this isn't really geared towards like what would actually happen, more so what could happen if it decided it wanted to go on a military conquest. So where would it first attack if it really wanted to? Well, looking over here at Central Asia, you can see the remnants of a few countries like Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, and Tajikistan. Pakistan got split in two, but the Abbasids will be going after Turkmenistan first, which will allow for them to cement a further coastline along the Caspian Sea. So the army moves in, and there is little to no issue in doing this. Turkmenistan lost a majority of its territory, and now they're losing the rest of it to the Abbasids. Is it Abbasid? Abbasid? I'm not going to toy with it. I really don't know. But in this treaty here, we can see that Turkmenistan is completely annexed by the Caliphate. Caliphate? Caliphate? You see, like, I'm struggling right now. Anyway, what would the world's reaction to this be? I mean, obviously, it would be shock, surprise, and probably terror. Terror because it's huge and very powerful, but there would also be some reactions by organizations such as NATO. However, in these scenario videos, I don't really like to touch with the international organizations like the UN, for example. We also don't like to talk about the EU or NATO because it just interferes with the scenario, and quite frankly, it's impossible for this thing to avoid war with NATO as it is if it really does want to expand. So we're just going to be like pretending that NATO doesn't exist. Anyway, the leader of this country has a goal in mind, and that is to basically try to unite all of the Islamic world in Afro-Eurasia. Now, this does not include countries like Indonesia because too far away, but it does include the countries that were within its general sphere of influence. So the next order that will be given out is to attack Egypt. And Egypt has lost all of its, not all of it, but most of its valuable land. You know, the Nile River Basin is like really important for Egypt. They do still have a little bit of it down over here. So the Abbasids will go down into Egypt, kind of going over the coastlines and into the less populated areas, but eventually a full-on military campaign will happen to capture that Nile River Basin, and they do, and Egypt will fall. But they won't be worrying about a peace treaty just yet because they want to continue their army's momentum down south into the country of Sudan. Sudan was completely untouched by the Abbasid Caliphate when it came back, so it is at full strength. However, Sudan in the modern day isn't a very stable country, and it would not be able to fight off an invading force such as this one. So the Caliphate moves down into Sudan, and honestly, I mean, yeah, Sudan should probably just surrender. Realistically, though, there might be a few countries that would just want to automatically join this. We'll talk about that here in a second. First, let's get this peace treaty. And in it, we see that Egypt is fully annexed and Sudan loses a lot of its northern land. However, the rest of Sudan is made into kind of a puppet state, but more for a buffer state between the Abbasid Caliphate and the rest of Africa. But like I was saying just a second ago, there might be a few countries that just straight up want to join this thing, and there will be a couple. One of them being Libya. They will just straight up say, hey, we're going to join. So Libya joins. I mean, Libya on its own at this point is crippled and probably one of the weakest countries in the world. So joining up with the Caliphate just makes sense for them. The other countries to join will be Uzbekistan and Afghanistan, who barely exist, which is the reason why they're joining. And now our map over here in Central Asia is looking something like this, a lot more cleaned up, but not complete just yet. However, we're now going to take a break from the video and look at another country, India. Why are we bringing up India? Well, that's because India decided that they need to invade Pakistan. Pakistan while it's weak. Now, I am aware that Pakistan in this current state would not be super weak. Like their capital city, for example, Islamabad, is still fine and in order. However, they did lose a lot of land over here, which could still be a little bit of an issue for the country. India understands this, and India wants to attack while they still can. So Indian troops will move right on into Pakistan, and the resistance here is very hostile, but it's not enough. This war takes a few months, but eventually Pakistan will fall over to India, and in the treaty they will be fully annexed, kind of starting the, I guess, the rebirth of the British Raj. Except this time, it's not British. But now moving back to our main character, the Abbasid Caliphate, they have a feeling that they need to go into the Western African area and maybe go into Iberia too. Now, currently Iberia isn't very Islamic, it's Spanish, Catholic. However, at one point in time, southern Iberia and even going into France sort of was Islamic. And they know this because they have history books from the modern day countries that they took over. So let's go after Algeria. Algeria is probably the strongest country. It is the strongest country that they have fought so far. And that's because they haven't lost too much. Don't get me wrong, they have lost a little bit, but it's more so just the land over here that they have lost, and they do retain some key areas over here. But when the Caliphate starts its war against Algeria, it isn't going to go so well for the Algerians because these guys are, well, there's just a lot of them, and their military would be very strong. The red team focuses mostly on taking over like the mid-ish areas away from Algeria's populated core, and that's just to cut off the top from the south, making the south very easy to take over. And from here we have the war on the north as the Caliphate's troops now move into the country, very slowly squeezing their way up, and the main campaign starts as they kind of just slowly move their way along the Algerian coast, eventually meeting up with the border of Morocco, and it is at this point that Algeria finally surrenders. And in this peace treaty, we see that Algeria loses all of its northern land, and the south is made into a puppet state, but something to note here that this isn't a puppet state like Sudan is. Sudan is a buffer zone, whereas this is just so they don't have to administer as much land as they do. But the war will not stop here. They are going to keep rolling west. We now are going after Morocco. Now, I'm not sure if Morocco would be the strongest country they fought at this point because Algeria, like I said, they didn't lose too much. They still had a lot of strength left, and Morocco is completely untouched. So yeah, this is probably the strongest country so far, but it's not an issue because of the pure numbers and the pure amount of military that this thing has. We also have to assume, like I said at the beginning of the video, that this thing is very stable, meaning that its economy output could be boosted and it could fund its expansion, its military, and so on and so forth, its administration. So that's why we kind of see these countries get absolutely bodied, because we are assuming that the Abbasid Caliphate would face absolutely no major setbacks. But back to the war, we have Morocco falling, and interestingly enough, getting fully annexed by the Abbasid Caliphate. So now we see that it is making great progress in its goal to reunite the Islamic world. Some key areas that they still need to go after include Turkey, and then the rest of Africa down here, and a little bit into Central Asia. But now, just to kind of speed up their process of wanting to create this Islamic empire, they are now going to declare war on a series of countries, including Western Sahara, Mali, that's not Mali, that's Mauritania, Mali now officially, and then Niger and Chad. This is their biggest war campaign thus far, and it will be the deadliest one they've fought, because these these four-ish countries will be doing their best to stop the impending doom that these guys are setting on them. Now, there is a common theme amongst these countries, and that is internal issues and weakness. We can thank European colonialism to that in part. But the main strategy now of the Caliphate is just to kind of like go down over here and just cut these guys off from the coast. And then we have an interesting deal happening. Basically what the Caliphate does is they go down to these southern-ish, southwestern-ish African nations, and they're like, hey, if you guys don't supply any of these countries, we will not invade you. Basically signing a non-aggression pact with all of these countries in exchange for them stopping sending resources into these countries. I don't know about you, but if I was a country like Gabon or Ghana or Burkina Faso, or I guess even Senegal or Sierra Leone, I would probably say, yes, please let me allow you to sign this non-aggression pact with me, and I won't help these guys out at all. And that's what a majority of countries do other than Nigeria. So now the next stage of this war is just to kind of do some invading. You really can't do much invading here. It's very deserty. In the sub-Saharan area, you could do a little bit, but the main strategy is just attrition. And by that, I mean starvation. Cutting off supplies to these countries means that they have no way to get supplies from outside countries. and they're also in an active state of war, meaning that the resource numbers will dwindle even further down. And eventually, these guys are all going to be forced into surrender over to the Abbasid Caliphate. So let's take a look at this peace treaty. And in this peace treaty here, we have quite a scary sight. We have all of North Africa under the control of the Abbasid Caliphate, which is based over in Baghdad. So it's interesting to see how they would be able to manage land this far away over in Western Sahara / Morocco. But nonetheless, that is the decision they make. They give Algeria a little bit of land, and then what they do is that they just smash together all of the other countries. They didn't fully annex all of them because they serve as a buffer state, but also because less administration means it's easier to retain your power. Yeah, we have Algeria, we have Mali, we have Chad, Algeria, and then we have Sudan. Now, the logic with giving Algeria a little bit of land is that, hey, we've been controlling Algeria longer than we've been controlling any of these three, so these guys are a lot more loyal. We don't have to worry about rebellion with them, so let's give them a little bit of land, just so that's less land that we give to these guys or these guys, meaning that if a rebellion were to ever happen, that's less land that we have to fight on, if that makes any sense. Also, I do want to say that time periods, if you're new to this channel, time doesn't really function correctly. Of course, the Abbasid Caliphate would not be able to go back to back to back to back in these wars, so just imagine that between every single war, there's a few months, maybe a few years, allowing for the country to refresh and make it easier for them to go on their conquest. I just don't like to talk about time periods. I don't know why. I should probably start doing that. It would make a lot more sense in the videos. But now the Abbasids are going to uphold their non-aggression treaties. They won't go after the rest of southwestern Africa, and instead will be shifting their focus over here to the peninsula of Anatolia, because Turkey still exists, and Turkey is a strong country, and they have been preparing for this war for a very long time. And you know who else has been preparing for this war? The Turks. So the Abbasids will start to move into Turkish territory. However, it isn't all sunshine and rainbows. The Turks will start a campaign into their old territory that was lost to the Abbasids, and they will do some serious damage in this country. The Caliphate was taken completely by surprise, and it causes a little bit of a logistical nightmare for the Abbasids. This leads to the Turks pushing back against them, and even entering into Abbasid territory, and all of a sudden this thing is looking like a nightmare, because why are we all of a sudden getting folded by one of these countries? So what they do is that they pull back their armies that aren't in the defensive front, and they're like, yo, what we're gonna do is that we're gonna reorganize, and then we're gonna go just sweep through this thing. So the Abbasids reorganize their military successfully and start sending in invasion forces right behind the defensive forces, and then all of a sudden on one day they break right through that defensive line. The Turks are completely pushed out of their gained lands, and the march towards the west will start as a sweeping front line is made going all the way across Turkey. Now, there are a lot of casualties in this war. It's a very bloody war, and the Abbasids know this, and they don't want to risk the life that they have, so they start looking for a partner in crime, and what better partner in crime than Greece? The Abbasids go to Greece, and they're like, if you attack Turkey and we'll let you get land as well, we will guarantee your independence, and we will also sign another non-aggression pact with you. Basically, Greece becomes an informal ally of the Abbasids. Greece, I mean, they're not going to turn down an opportunity to attack Turkey, especially when victory is almost certainly guaranteed. So the Abbasids will be trading their own manpower for Greek manpower, sort of. That's a weird way to look at that, but yes. And the Greeks will start their invasion into Turkey, going straight on into Istanbul and renaming that city. This makes the Turks very angry, but not as angry as they are as they start to lose their country, and eventually we have their capital city getting captured. Ankara, I don't know why it slipped my mind. And then the Greeks start making naval landings on the coastal areas of Turkey, and they start to push out. They do kind of struggle to get past Istanbul, but they don't have to worry about that too much because the Abbasids got the clutch. They are coming all the way over, and eventually they will meet the Greeks, and then the two armies will meet up in central Turkey to make a peace treaty, one that will actually be in Ankara. So let's take a look at that. Oh. And in this peace treaty, we see that the Abbasids are successful in taking over almost all of Anatolia. They do uphold their promise and give Greece the lands that they annexed. They do meet up with Istanbul, though, and at this point, it's actually probably called Constantinople because Greece owns it. And they kind of just split the strait that goes into the Black Sea. Now, I know that the goal of the Abbasids was to unite the entire Islamic world, and they've done a great job at doing that so far, but there are some exceptions that are obviously going to be made, such as the exceptions to this area of Africa, and then the exception to the rest of Turkey. They probably won't be going after Albania, but they will, however, make some exceptions for their policy as well, because they're not going to be going after just Islamic countries. They're going after Spain next. And this is going to be quite an issue, because as soon as they declare war on Spain, they get a coalition formed against them, with countries like Portugal, France, and Italy being involved. And this will be the Abbasid Caliphate's biggest challenge so far. The Latin countries have banded together to stop Islam from spreading into Western Europe. And we might see Battle of Pores Part 2, maybe with a different victor this time though. So on the first couple of days of the war, we have the Abbasids losing their claim over Sicily, but they do manage to invade up into Spain. However, the war plans are going to have to be altered because there are just so many more troops that they're facing at this point. But it won't be the red team that is just going on the offensive, because Western Europe doesn't want to sit around and just play defense the whole time. They want to make their moves as well. And we will see a landing over here in Tunisia, capturing the city of Tunis. We will also see one down over in Algeria, capturing their capital city of Algiers somewhere. And this front will eventually connect up, but the Abbasids aren't too worried about it. They're just still going after Spain, and they are winning against the Western European armies. But this is a very difficult task for them. I mean, obviously this war is going to be very expensive. It's going to be very hard to win. I'm not saying that they're going to lose, especially because this video is about them, but they might need some help from another country. But who is going to help them in this war? I mean, they really don't have any allies because they've invaded everyone. Greece is definitely not interested. They don't want to fight against their Western European allies. So what about Nigeria? They didn't sign the non-aggression pact earlier, and maybe that's because they didn't trust the Abbasids, but now they've definitely proven to themselves that they are going to uphold their promises made to foreign countries. They haven't invaded West Africa, and doing something as ambitious as invading Spain, knowing that you might get a coalition formed against you, just kind of goes to show that you're playing your cards exactly how you want them to. And if you really were to go after these guys, you probably would have done that before you did something like this. So Nigeria gives them the check mark. They trust them, and they will start sending volunteer troops up, as well as sending resources over. And this is to the dismay of Europe, but I mean, remember what Europe did to Africa, so obviously, if there's any chance to clap back at Europe and get your revenge, this would be a great time to do it. So with the help of Nigeria and their resources, the Abbasids are going to go a little bit further, and eventually they'll reach all the way up and capture the city of Madrid. As for this front line over here, it will actually continue to expand as the Abbasids just leave it alone. I mean, they're defending it. They're not trying to push it out though. Now the next part of their plan starts as they start to move troops over into Portugal. Portugal, I mean, you probably would have gotten invaded eventually, but you didn't need to join the war right now, but they did. And obviously, it doesn't go so well for them as they lose their capital in Lisbon and they are forced to surrender way before Spain does. And all of a sudden, the Abbasids have a pretty good grasp over all of Iberia. Additionally, down south, we see something that the Europeans were worried that would happen. We see the Great Counteroffensive be carried out. It goes pretty well, but ultimately it is considered a failure as Europe retains their land possessions over Northern Africa. So instead of worrying about that, let's just continue where we are successful, and that is in Iberia. Eventually, Europe will make the call to pull out of Iberia completely and fall back to the French border, in which they do. Additionally, we see the capturing of these 3 islands and a big pushback over here as the Abbasid Navy gains a huge advantage with Spain being out of the war. And at this point, it becomes a war of attrition between the Abbasids and France and Italy, but they're going to head back to the deal table because these guys are pretty good at drawing up diplomatic relations and making good deals. Hey, Italy, you know how we own this little piece of Sicily? If we gave you that back, would you maybe leave the war? I mean, you guys are going to lose this anyway. You can see that we've already captured all of our target in Spain and Portugal, and there's really no point in fighting anymore because we don't have any interest in going towards you. So if we agree to give you this piece of land back, would you just leave the war and be peaceful with us? Well, Italy is notorious for switching sides, so they obviously will take this deal. And France feels a little betrayed. Now the Abbasids will enter into French territory, causing the French government to explode. It will form a new government, and that new government will leave the war and agree to peace terms with the Abbasids. So let's take a look at this peace treaty between them and Western Europe. And in this treaty here, we see that Iberia is almost fully annexed. They didn't have interest in this land right here, so they just gave it to France, and then they also took a little bit of France's land. Italy, on the other hand, is happy because they retain all of Sicily now, and they are on neutral terms with the Abbasids, meaning they don't have to worry about any kind of invasion force going up into Italy for now. And Andorra, let's just do that real quick. And yeah, so now we're going to jump over here real quick because there's one last thing that the Abbasids want to do before they declare themselves at their peak territorial expansion. Basically, go into a neutral state and stop invading other people. Hey, you know, Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan and Kazakhstan, let's get rid of those. And the army will mostly focus in on Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan. And after that, Kazakhstan is just kind of no, we're not fighting this. And in this treaty here, Central Asia is gone because it is now all a part of the Caliphate. Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan are completely annexed, and Kazakhstan loses a lot of land. However, they do still exist just as a puppet state to the Caliphate. Zooming out, this thing is huge, and that is actually going to do it for today's video. So if you guys did enjoy today's video, make sure to leave a like on it and subscribe to the channel if you're new. All the support is greatly appreciated as we're trying to get to 200,000 subscribers. I do now realize that I originally intended for these guys to go to war with India at some point and reclaim Pakistan. I forgot. My bad, but I do have to get to the rest of these pre-recorded videos. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video.
And of course, thank you to all our super fans. This includes Serminator, Augusto, King Cheese, a Norwegian, RS, Dale Martinez, Australian Geo Guy, America and Canada and UK, Zaylance, Lazo Does Nothing, Rizioid, Laser Taze, Nevada Garbage Trucks, Pablo Sigma Cat, Death Strider X, Hammer Toad 45, CTG on YT, and DW Cool Dude. Once again, thank you guys.